love. So it's 2002, 2003 or whatever, and it's a cliche. I was at Sardi's having lunch with my agent. Okay. And my agents were late, another cliche. But it was for a good reason. They came in and they said, we're sorry we're late, but we're late because we just got an offer for you. And I'm like, oh great, what's my next movie? Right, oh well, right. And they said, well, it's actually a TV pilot. Oh, I said, oh, great. What is it? And they said, well, there was a television show back in 1977. And I went, well, and they said, and it's kind of a reinvention or a remake of the show called Battlestar Galactica. And I said, huh? Anyway, long story short, went home, read the script, absolutely fell apart, prayed to the Irish, guardian angels that my silly arrogance didn't get in my way. And then I went to meet Ron and David Icke and Michael Reimer for a breakfast. Michael Reimer, David Icke, yeah. They've been working on this a long time. Ron, it was the first time that I actually had the opportunity to look in those beautiful eyes. In his quiet, intelligent way, said, do you have any questions? And I said, well, I do, as a matter of fact. In the very first scene, Laura's diagnosed with terminal cancer. Is this a long job or a short one? and this is when I fell in love with Ron, because he got a look on his face that was so kind and compassionate. He just immediately knew, oh, this poor woman doesn't know whether it's a week or 7 years. And he said, oh no. She will be with us until we find Earth. That is Ron. So without further ado, how about we get on our feet for this guy that we love? Welcome, Ronald D. So Ron, hi.
Hi.
Do you remember that moment by any chance?
I do. I don't remember that question, but I remember that breakfast.
Yeah, I know.
It was a big deal for us, and to get you, it was a huge. And I wrote the part. I said this before. I wrote the part for you because when I was writing the miniseries, I'm writing a character, and I'm literally writing the script for the show. And a friend of mine had given me, he said, oh, you've got to watch this movie. Have you seen Donnie Darko? Right? I said, no. And he said, oh, that's crazy, you're going to love it. And Mary had part in it. And as I'm watching this, I'm hearing Laura's voice. I'm like, that's her. It's Mary. And so she goes to the top of, you always make these casting lists of who you might get. And it's usually a fantasy list. But that was the number one choice.
I'm easy. Well, it was really clearly one of the greatest, maybe it's one of, the best roles I've ever been offered and never had the opportunity to explore. We were just talking about it backwards, but I want to get right to things because we only have precious time. Ron. So I want to go back to Ithaca. Ron and I share Ithaca, New York. He was at Cornell. I grew up there. Thank God it was in different years. I might have met him as a townie at a frat party. Anyway.
I can think of worse things than that.
It would have gone a whole different way. So I'm glad the way it worked out. So, you have an extraordinary ability to handle multiple stories, hundreds and hundreds of people, designers, everyone. So when you were a younger man, when you were, say, in high school or in your years at Cornell, Did you know that about yourself, A? And B, is there anyone who helped you discover that?
Probably when I was in high school, my high school band director, I was in the marching band in high school. And my high school band director, his name was Larry Hobson, and he had an enormous impact on my life. Not so much in how to juggle different stories and things like that, but he taught me what it was to be a professional. And the way he ran that band and brought a team together under his leadership, I always admired that and always wanted to be able to do that. And I learned a lot of things about what it meant to take a job seriously, but to still have fun and still like try to achieve the very best you possibly could and not kill people doing it. And to realize you're not curing cancer here. You know, we are playing music, we're competing, we're taking it very seriously, but you know, lighten up every once in a while. And remember, we're all in this together, and there was a philosophy in a band, or anyone who's been in a band, you know, all the instruments are equal. It's like you're all contributing to the piece of music that you're doing. And so that kind of idea and that philosophy of leading a team and being part of a team, you know, was something I thought consciously about when I was in a position to do that personally. You know, I carried that forward.
Was there anything inside of you that you understood already that allowed you to believe that you could write the first script, say, for Star Trek? Didn't you hand it to like your tour guide?
I did. The story, the famous story, the somewhat famous story is that, you know, I took a tour of the Star Trek sets and I brought a script with me because I had enough ego to think that of course they're going to read my script, I'm on the tour. I managed to get the tour guide the guy who was giving the tour to read it, and he turned out to be one of Gene Roddenberry's assistants, and I got some into the show, and you know, the rest is kind of history. I always believed, and I had written since I was a kid, and I always wrote stories, and I wrote a play in high school, and I always really enjoyed it, and I didn't really consider making it a career until much later, because it wasn't a real job. I grew up in a very small town in Central California, and being a writer wasn't a real job. Like, nobody actually did that. So I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and that's what I studied at Cornell, was government. And then once I was there, I discovered I didn't want to be a lawyer. I actually wanted to be Perry Mason. I wanted to make big, dramatic courtroom speeches, and you know, and have that. And then I realized at some point, well, I really like the drama of being a lawyer. I don't really want to be a lawyer.
That makes perfect sense. And when you say you had a big enough ego, I'm kind of interested in that. What I'm hearing a lot from young people, and you probably are too. The way that one has enough confidence to do what Ron did, which was to write an episode and hand it to a tour guide. How do you know that in yourself, and how do you find out about that? And I'm hearing that a lot of that kind of confidence is harder at the moment for young people to nail down in themselves, because they're so bombarded with so many millions of people now that they can see across the world doing things. Do you think that that's changed? Do you think it was an easier time to discover your own power, what you call ego, I would call power?
I'm not sure if it's changed or not, to be honest. I think it was still a step into the unknown, right? It was still putting yourself forward in a situation where you could face rejection.
Right.
And the thing about the business is that it rejects you over and over, right? So you had to sort of get past that and be willing to risk that. It's the willingness to risk.
Right.
And confidence, I have learned over time, confidence is one of the key factors to success in this business. You know, when you're sitting and you're pitching executives, whether in a studio or a network, or a director or an actor of a role, you have to pitch it with confidence. You have to believe in the story. You have to say, this is a great story, and you know, you have to kind of sell it. And that confidence instills confidence in others, and it kind of all makes it go together. I'm not looking back, it's hard to pin down why I felt that confidence.
Yeah.
That's why I ascribe to ego. It's just like a weird, I just had this belief I was gonna do it.
Yeah.
And I gave it to him, and once he turned in the script, I fully believed it was gonna sell. I was like, I was just gonna wake up and call. Like, I mean, I don't, looking back, it's such a stupid thing to say, but it did work. But I didn't have any logical reason to believe it was,
Yeah.
but I did.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So now how many shows do you have going now? Next door.
All age or something. Wolverine just appeared.
Okay, so you've got, okay, I have to look at my notes for this because it's so amazing. So you're writing season 5 for All Mankind?
Season 5 for All Mankind has been shot right now.
Oh, so
Started filming this past week, and they're writing the spin-off series called Star City.
and that's about the Russian program,
About
right?
the Russian program.
That's exciting. And you've got Outlander 7B coming out November 25th. And you're shooting season 8?
We're in the middle of shooting the final season 8 of Outlander.
And why is it final?
Just came time to bring the story to a close, for a variety of reasons. It's been a long shoot in Scotland,
Yeah.
and the story is nearing its end. And we just decided, okay, we're going to end it here.
It's amazing to think about. And what about Blood of My Blood?
Blood of My Blood has been shot, and that's in the can, and it's just being edited together, and it looks like a great show.
So Ron, do you think you're doing enough?
Well, you have to remember, in all honesty, I've handed off the reins of both those shows to other showrunners, so I'm not day to day on those shows. But I was very proud of the work we all did. And in both cases, I've handed the reins off to two showrunners who worked with me from the beginning of those projects. On Outlander, it's Matt Roberts, who was there from day one in the writers' room, and then Matt and Devi co-created for All Mankind with me. So there was a confidence level, and you just move on. I mean, for me personally, I kind of get antsy after a while.
I get it.
It's like a couple of years in, I've been doing the show for a while, and I'm ready to do the next one because I like the beginning of the project a lot. I like the beginning where we're talking about the fundamentals. Who's Laura? What's going to be like? What's the ship going to look like? What's the music? What's the pace of the show? What's the rhythm of the show? What's the color choices? It's all those key fundamental decisions that you make in year one that I really enjoy. There's a thrill to that. There's a risk, and there's like scary things that could go wrong, and you don't know. You're always battling with the powers that be, because at the beginning they're all like, we're spending a lot of money on this.
About everything.
It better work. And once it works, then that pressure kind of comes off, and I'm like, okay, it's great, it's working. And then by that point, I'm usually sort of, what if I started something else over there? And so it's great to be able to delegate the role to run the show day to day to somebody else.
Do you sleep well with all of this pressure? No, it is. I guess that's funny, but I'm sort of asking seriously because I understand the creative mind from my point of view, and sometimes if I had multiple stories running in my mind and all those people to manage, I'm not sure how I would shut it off. How do you do that?
I don't know that I ever shut it off, but I think it moves into a different part of my brain. Once I leave the set, or I leave the office, or I'm not writing that day, and I'm just home and I'm watching Seinfeld or something, for the 11th time, there's a part of the back of my brain that is still working out a scene that I'm struggling with. They're still like wondering why that cut didn't work, or what's a better music choice. But it's not front. It's not the front of my brain. So I'm not thinking about it consciously, so it's not quite so stressful. I sleep and I try to enjoy my life, and I try not to be consumed by the job, because it's real easy. There's no limit to how far down the rabbit hole you can go as a showrunner. You can, if you want to, you can get involved in every single aspect of this production to the nth degree. Walk into go talk to the sound guys for hours, go to the art department and spend all day doing it. But I choose not to do that, and I try to delegate those things and trust the people that I have, and just try to keep the big picture. Because as the showrunner, I kind of feel like my job is to deliver the show. Like, I deliver the show. I don't deliver a piece of the show. I'm the guy that has to deliver the whole show. So I try to always keep the big picture in mind of where is the show working overall is really my big concern.
And did you ever have a moment, Star Trek, Battlestar, For All Mankind, Outlander, and all the many others, where you felt like you were losing control?
There's times when you feel, yeah, something has gone wrong, the budget comes in. Usually what happens when I would feel like, wow, the floor just fell away, is when you thought you knew that you were going to be able to make an episode for a number, and then the bids come in and you're like, wow, it's like twice as much as we thought.
Right.
And then you're like so close to production, usually now you've got to revamp, rework, and re-break the whole thing all over again, and it's scary because you realize there's domino effects about all the shows you've planned after that. So there's moments in production that are scary. You're like, oh shit, how are we going to get out of this? Like, this is a real problem. Usually those are just production that gives me that kind of fear. Usually on the writing and the creative front, if we're having problems in the writer's room, it's usually go home and sleep on it, we'll figure it out tomorrow. If I'm having a struggle on a page, smoke pot, you know.
I was waiting for that. Because that's just the best solution.
The answer will get there somehow. And you try to just believe that you're going to work it out. And eventually you work them all out. So.
Do you remember, this is a moment from our history, right? So, and the reason I bring it up, it's along those lines where there was a moment of, I experienced it as a creative pause. And I think it was right at the beginning of season 2. But I'm not very good with all that, so you might remember better. And the reason I'm bringing it up is it stayed with me as an actress as a lesson, which I loved, right? We finished a read-through, and you and I were sitting next to each other, I think, or near each other, and everybody gets up to leave, as they do after a read-through. They go out to smoke or whatever it is, quickly. And we both didn't get up. And you turned to me, and you said, and I stayed too, we just stayed, and you said, you know, Mary, I'm not sure where to go with it. Do you remember this?
I remember that conversation. I don't remember it was after a table read.
I think it was. Well, maybe it wasn't. But I said, I know. And we looked at each other because we were in a blank. And that's not normal. You know what I mean, right? It isn't. It's sort of, you think as a creative person in what we do, if you get to that point, that's a bad thing. And yet I remember it didn't feel bad. It felt interesting.
I kind of remember,
right?
Yeah, I kind of remember that moment because I remember there was just a big question mark about where to go from here. And I remember feeling comfortable enough to admit that to you.
Yes, I know.
We'd worked together long enough. I knew you weren't going to like call your agent or something.
This guy doesn't like me. He won't write for me. No, not at all.
And there was an opportunity in that too, because we can now do whatever we wanted because it was kind of a blank mess.
Yes.
We didn't know where it was going to be. So then the next question is, well, what could it be?
Right.
You know, and what are the options and which way could we go with it?
That's right. And I remember that I went home that night and I was thinking how I felt liberated in a way because as you work as an actor, you get better and better at working in the blank spaces. And if you can keep going back to the nothing, your character, Laura, certainly didn't know what was ahead. I mean, none of this was in her way. So it kind of changed the way that I approached Laura, because you were comfortable, and it actually changed the way I approached the work. So doing a TV series now, not knowing where I'm going, is like my favorite thing. And people always say, did you talk to the writers, and what is it you wanted the writers to do for you? And I say, no, I just like to see. And it was from that moment, so I thank you, my friend, for that. Now, you are amazing with women, is he not? You had the best female characters on television, bar none. And they're all over the place because you've got so many shows. So I look at the women that you create, and because I just binged For All Mankind, which, oh my God!
Yeah.
What an incredible show! Oh, and I told Ron this, I am so addicted to Margot. I cannot get enough of her. I just want to live with her, and be around her, and watch her think forever, right? And the love story, Margot and Sylvia, I can't. She buried her head in that pillow and I screamed for her. Anyway, what I really want to know about is, as I look at your women, as I experienced one of your women, you have this really incredibly intuitive way of understanding how a female approaches, backs off, wields, pretends, how she relates to power. And you can see her in different time periods doing that according to what the culture is saying is a woman's power or what it should be or should not be. And time again, your women break through something that either then destroys them or liberates them or whatever. And I don't know of anyone that's quite doing that. So I don't mean to embarrass you, but I wanted to ask you, is that feminism to you? What is that in you that understands, in my opinion, so brilliantly the plight of woman and woman empowered woman? That was a long-ass question.
Could you read the question back? It's an interesting question. I'm not sure where that comes from. I know that in my experience as a writer, I have always enjoyed writing for female characters, and I've always found it, as a writer, one of the fundamental parts of the job is to have empathy for somebody. Empathy for somebody who's not yourself. You're always writing for another character, and trying to understand somebody else's point of view. And I was always drawn towards writing interesting female characters as a way of putting myself in somebody else's shoes and thinking about it from that point of view. And at the beginning, especially at Star Trek, I was always interested in I've never seen a female starship captain. Like one of the first episodes I wrote or co-wrote in that series was called Yesterday's Enterprise. And I just remember, as I was working on the story of Yesterday's Enterprise, I just sort of thought, well, what if the captain of the Enterprise C was a woman? And that's interesting. We hadn't seen a female captain before. And I was like, oh, so I'll do that. And then I just kept thinking like that. Well, it's interesting. I've never seen a woman character do this. I've never seen a female character do this, or play this role, or be Starbuck, or So it's always like trying to do something interesting, and the process of then trying to be inside that other character and looking at the world through other eyes. It's just, I don't know. I enjoy it, and I guess I have an affinity for that, for doing it for female characters for whatever reason, and I'm always kind of drawn to write for them. And I mean, it's interesting, I'm always touched and surprised when people say that they like the way I do that, because I'm not a woman, and I can only extend my empathy and my sort of understanding to a certain point, but it does, I don't know, I do enjoy it, it does seem to work.
Well, you bring your women to a point in themselves, and you don't have to go any further because you bring them to it, and then we can watch them wrestle with it. But part of why I think you do it so successfully is that you write such great men. There's a balance in all of your shows. I mean, you write really manly men, right? Does he nod?
I've written some time.
And everybody falls in love. Women fall in love with women, men fall in love with men, women and men fall in love with each other. And the level of love. I can't even begin to talk about Claire and Jamie. Oh my God, right? But I mean, you write these men that give the balance that I think you must carry inside of you. And it's a rare, it's something admirable in you, Ron, that you do have a female-male balance that I think you have naturally. But you never think about that? You just do it.
I mostly just do it. I think the only times that I think about it overtly is when I'm writing a romance story,
Yeah.
or a tale about whether it's an episode or whether it's an arc, and I'm consciously thinking about the moves between, a couple and how they move back and forth, and what the balance is of that. But I even as I say that, I don't think about it in terms of male and female, in terms of like what the man would do in a situation with the woman. I tend to think about it as the characters. What would Claire do here? How does Claire pull back? When would she pull back? When does Jamie advance? And what's Jamie's insecurity about that? Laura and Adama, which is like
The most unlikely couple.
a very unlikely couple, and yet it's interesting. At the very beginning of the project, I told the writers, it was one of the first things I said in the writers' room was, okay, everyone's going to want to write the Laura and Adama love story. We're not doing that story for a long time. So don't be pitching me that story. That has to wait. We might get, I said from the beginning, we might get there. We're probably going to have to get there. Because these two characters are unique. She's the president, he's the commander of the fleet. They share an experience that is unique. No one else understands their world. Only they understand their responsibilities. Only they understand what it is to be in power at that level. And they have no peers except each other. So this is kind of ready to be a romance, one way or another. But I want them to take a long journey before they get there. And so I think, without us ever really trying to, we were telling a love story, but it was just like, we're going to put this on a low burn for quite a while.
Well, it was on a really low burn. I was just thinking, I'm so glad I wasn't in the writer's room, and I didn't know this, right? But when you're talking about it, it was in the ether.
Yeah.
And I remember right in the beginning, one of the episodes where we'd been having one of those arguments where Adama just wouldn't look at me. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be going on about something, and he would just be looking at the floor. And it was a power struggle, right? And so I remember thinking, ugh, this guy. And then I go, yeah, but I don't know. And so it was kind of in the ether, but I was surprised by it, and I loved it, and this is part of what I love about you is that when they did discover love, it wasn't just a crush, it was the real deal.
It was real.
It was the real deal.
They had gone through a lot together, they had gone through a lot separately, they had seen each other in moments of rage, they had seen each other at their low points, they had seen their kindness towards each other and towards other people. They knew each other's humanity, and it was great. That whole section where they're on New Caprica, they kind of like they're getting stoned, and
yeah, that was great.
It was so much fun. It was like seeing them for a moment. You can see who they could have been if these other events had never happened. They were just pure. It was just fun, and they could just be themselves.
Yeah, and I love the idea of what you just said, what they could have been in another life.
Yeah.
So then we go to Janie and Claire.
Yep.
I read the books years ago, so I was thrilled when I heard you were doing them. But I really did not expect the idea of the man, the woman, the soulmate, the person that you are traveling through life after life after life with that you may or may not recognize in this lifetime or that lifetime. I had no idea that it could be done in a way that seems completely, utterly tangible for all of us. And I think there's tremendous hope in that. Did you realize that when you read the books? Did you see the hope in their soul journeying together?
I did to an extent. I saw that this was the great romance. This was the true soulmates. And I was immediately like, wow, that's a tough one. How do we pull that off? Because it's asking a lot to buy into that concept. It is. And Diana did a beautiful job in the book, but now you're really dependent You gotta have real chemistry in that casting, which we fortunately found. You know, and how you deliver the show week after week to make it believable and grounded, and that you can feel the power of that love overcoming all these other obstacles was a real challenge. You know, and
Absolutely.
it's a philosophical idea about what is the nature of love. You know, that those books and that show say there is one true love. I'm not sure that's true. There can be many loves. You know,
Yes.
Love is a many splinter thing. But for that show, you had to lean into it. And you had to embrace it. And you had to completely believe in it. So when we were working on the show, we too had to believe it. We believed in the writer's room. You just had to always keep it front and center that this can't be broken. You have to keep it on.
I think that is absolutely remarkable. I really do. And I think when I say hopeful, and it's true, there are many, many loves. You're all out there. You're all in love with each other. Admit it, right? But it is possible that there are combinations of selves and pieces of selves that you may, if you're lucky enough, run into and get to flourish with, rather than I do think, if you buy into the concept, which I do, there's also collisions that can occur, which you've also written about or shown us. And I'm wondering for you, when you're shooting something like that, and you're all clear in the writer's room, but when you get onto the set, and that's the concept you're creating, how does that affect the crew? What did you notice?
There's a big gulf between the writer's room and the set, right?
Yeah.
It's a different medium. It's a different art form. And when I'm on the set, I generally don't like being on the set. You know, I'm not a showrunner that's on the set all the time. I go, especially in the pilot in the early days, I'm there because there's decisions to be made. You gotta, you know, hey, do you like this wall color? You know, no, repaint that. You know, so there's a lot of that going on. But I'm not an actor, and the craft of acting and the art of it is something very different. And I don't always see it. There's times I'm watching it live on set, and I'm not sure if it works or not.
Right.
And I have to see the footage later, and then I have to see it cut together.
Yep.
It's not until I'm in the editing room that, with an editor who's putting the footage together, and I'm watching the flow of the piece, and seeing how the emotion plays there. I mean, that's the art form of film is really, it's film. It's like you're watching motion, you're watching the performances, how they flow together, and realizing that, oh, you know, she was better in that take. Let's use take 2 here instead of take 3, and then the whole scene like pops, you know, or God, we're gonna have to reshoot this because it's just not working. But on the stage, I'm always just kind of hoping for the best. It's like, I think they've got it, I think we understand the intent of the scene, but I really have to trust my director and my cast that they understand what we're trying to do, and that later when I'm watching it in the cutting room, I'm going, oh yeah, wow, look at that.
Do you ever feel like you have to really talk to the crew and clue them into where you are? Or do you think by the time you get there, they're ready to shoot what you envisioned?
Well, it's been, you know, you talk to the department heads and the crew to a certain extent. You really have conversations with the department heads, the head of makeup, the head of costume, art direction, you know, on down the line, construction. And they're talking to you and showing you plans, and you're making plans, you're having endless production meetings. And through all those meetings, I'm telling them the story, telling them why we need this scene. Why am I going to spend all this money on this set? This set's really important. Oh, we're over budget? That set's not important because the story is this. And so you're trying to give them, everybody on the production, a sense of what the overall picture is. This is what we're all trying to accomplish. So help me make this movie. Help me tell this story. So you're constantly trying to invest the whole team with a sense of, you know, what we're trying to do. It is a team sport. We're all trying to accomplish a goal together. And the more communication I have with them about intent, the better. I don't know how to do their jobs. You know, I don't know how to construct costumes. I don't know how to make a set. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle I don't personally know how to do, but I know what I'm trying to achieve. And And so I leave it in their hands. Here's what I want. Try to get me from here to there.
If you were to go back and to, let's say, Battlestar Galactica, and either start it, if you were starting it now, knowing what you know. Yeah, let's do that. If you were to go back, if you were to start Battlestar now, as opposed to 2003, do you think any of it had, the way you approached it would change, or do you think that, I mean, the world has changed in a way it hasn't at all. What do you think?
I mean, the story itself would probably be different because I wrote it at a specific moment in our lives, in our history, right? I was approached to do the project just a few months after the 9/11 attacks. As it was developed, the invasion of Afghanistan that happened, and then Iraq, and Guantanamo Bay, and we were dealing with the Patriot Act, and a lot of issues of freedom versus security, and terrorism, a modern world, and fundamentalism. There were all those issues were so current and so forward in terms of what we were all thinking and feeling and talking about. And I wanted the show to talk about who we were at that moment. So if I was creating Battlestar from scratch today, I'd have to really, I don't know, it's so hard to let go of what the show became, and I don't know what the construct would be today. It would probably be similar. I would still try to approach it with the same attitude that I approached the original, which was, I want to preserve the framework of what the original was. I want it to be recognizable as Battlestar Galactica and honor the original and say it's still, it's a warship, an aircraft carrier in space, guiding a ragtag civilian fleet, running from the Cylons, after an apocalyptic attack. And it's about their society and what are the pieces of their civilization they choose to carry with them, what's important to them, what's it mean to be a democracy. And then getting down into the weeds, then it would be different. It would all be informed by the last 20 years, what we've gone through.
And what we're going through.
What we're going through.
Oh my goodness, what a week, huh? How much time do we have left? 10 minutes. Are we doing questions? No? Okay, no. We're going to keep talking. We got 10 minutes. What the frack? So can you tell us anything about the new shows or not?
Not much.
Okay. Is there anything you want to talk about?
I'm curious about, what your perceptions were of me and of the writers as an actress on the show, and sort of your relation, as scripts came out, and were they developing the ways you anticipated and thought about, or what was your sort of sense of, how that worked from your point of view? Because we always felt like I said, there's a gulf between the stage and the writer's room, and being on the other side of that, so I was curious what that experience is like.
Well, what I remember, I particularly remember the beginning of Battlestar because we were, as Ron made reference to, we were really still sort of traumatized by September 11th. So the idea that we were gathered and that you were leading us through a story that allowed us to actualize some of that made everyone very excited and nervous. So there was a little trauma in the air, if you remember. And what I remember about the writer's room was that there was an open door to whatever we needed to talk about. But it was very clear who was writing the show. Very clear. Which, by the way, I love. Well, you know me, I was crazy back then. I would email Ron and say, can I say that instead of I mean, who had time to listen to me do that? It was kind of me finding Laura too, a little bit of OCD. But there was a welcome openness, but it was very clear that you were writing the show and that your writers looked up to you, trusted you, and that the questions that we had and whatever we discussed would be generously listened to. But this show is going to go the way you showed us. And I love that because I grew up in New York as an actress with off Broadway plays, and you work with writers day in, day out, figuring things out. So when I'm near a writer's room where there's clearly someone at the helm that people in the writer's room respect, there's a calmness and there's a focus. To me, I can relax. I don't think all actors feel the same. So that was my experience. I thought it was a great environment. Did you?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great writer's room and a great environment, and I learned things from other showrunners I worked for. Ira Bear, who ran Deep School, started with him on Next Gen, and then he ran the Deep Space Nine writer's room. And Ira was the one that told me, a showrunner in the writer's room is first among equals. And that phrase always stuck with me. You're first among equals. We're all equals in this writer's room. We're all WGA members. We can all contribute. We can all argue with each other. You can challenge him. You can tell him this is a better way to go. But at the end of the day, somebody has to say, okay, we're going right instead of left.
Right.
And then you move on. And so it was to entertain the debate and be willing to go down roads that might be blind alleys and you have to go all the way back.
Yeah.
But you had this sense of community to a writer's room that was really, really important. And I still try to maintain that to this day as a philosophy of how to run that particular part of the production.
And how do you choose them? What is it about them that grabs your heart?
It's people. Some are people I've worked with previously that you go back to multiple times because you develop a relationship with. Others come to you through other forums. Matt and Ben on Mankind, we shared an agent together and came to me, and we were looking into other development when the For All Mankind opportunity came up. And I just had a good sense of them. I'd spent some time sitting in a room with them, laughing and arguing and trying to work stuff through, and had a sense of them as storytellers. And I'm really looking for storytellers. And you get a sense of who can tell a story and who can't, because you sit in those rooms for hours on end, which is why I hate Zoom writers' rooms. Because when you sit in person with writers for hours, you really start to understand each other. Because every writer is going to say, this happened to my mother, this happened to my brother, this is my story. And they share parts of their lives with you. And sometimes people cry, people get upset. You see the whole range of emotions in that room, and you really bond as a team because you become intimate with one another as you're working on something about a Dama or Starbuck. It's revealing parts of everyone else's history.
Did you ever have a situation where an actor simply obsessed on an idea that you didn't want to write, but you surrendered? No.
I think I've always just politely said, I get it, we're just not going to do it.
I think I might have heard that once. Right? This was Mary, like, Ron, do I have to die? And I made a good living dying, so it's okay. No, it was great. It was one of my greatest deaths.
Fantastic.
It was fantastic. Oh my gosh. Well, let's see. When I think about Iran, and I think about where we're headed politically, which we don't know, but we know what the issues are, and we're looking at, aren't there some astronauts right now that are stuck up at the International Space Station, and there's wars all over the world, and we're dealing with climate. And I just wanted to say personally that I feel a deep sense of gratitude for your mind, because I think that we're entering a time where, and everyone in this room is part of what I'm saying, I think that the community of storytellers and people who gravitate towards each other through the stories are the only place that we're going to develop whatever we need for whatever's coming. So it is an absolute honor to know you, to have you, and we just want you to keep writing forever, so please don't stop.
Thank you.